welcome back to my channel. I decided to make another video. I hope you guys are buckled up for another kind of weird one because this is a weird video. I hardly even know how to get into this video other than just doing it. So we are talking about Michael Crichton today, and I will be exposing him for the problematic author that he maybe was, which is heartbreaking. But I found some receipts, some evidence that I want to share with you guys because it's so bizarre. This is a bizarre one today. If you guys have followed me for a little while, you'll know that my favorite author is T. Kingfisher, just all around obsessed with T. Kingfisher. But if you had asked me who my favorite author was prior to my discovery of T. Kingfisher, I would have absolutely said Michael Crichton. And honestly, still, he is absolutely one of my favorite authors. I first discovered Michael Crichton, yes, I discovered him, no one else knew of him before, through his main, most popular book, Jurassic Park. Look, I have my Folio Society copy right here. Now, I've told this story before on camera a couple of times. I read Jurassic Park when I was probably way too young, when I was about 10 or 11 years old. My grandfather had a copy of it at our family cottage and I had nothing to read. And I thought, hey, I've heard of Jurassic Park. I haven't seen the movie yet. So I grabbed it off the shelf and I flew through it and I loved it. And the reason specifically that I loved Jurassic Park was because it was the first book I'd ever read that made me feel smart. Michael Crichton's work was the first that really made me feel like I was learning something while reading. And yes, he is a doctor and scientist, so it makes sense. I've also told my story about how I lost my first edition copy of Jurassic Park to an ex-boyfriend. Tragedy. After Jurassic Park, I took it upon myself to just read all of his other books. This is just another copy of Jurassic Park. And I've read almost everything he's written. My favorites, of course, are his medicine and science-related ones. So these three here, 5 Patients, A Case of Need, and The Andromeda Strain, none of which were appropriate for an 11 to 12-year-old to read, but I read them anyways. I've also read his more adventurous stuff like Pirate Latitudes and Eaters of the Dead, and his really just boring stuff like The Great Train Robbery. What the heck was that? But a couple of years ago, I was at an extended family member's house when I made a discovery. This story is going to sound really weird, but it's important for me to share it for the context of the video. And because of the weird context, I'm not gonna be giving any names or specifics. I just hear me out, okay? So this extended family member is one of those people that has a room in their home plastered with vintage pornography. Yes. Not in a creepy way, in a vintage cool way. So some friends and I were hanging out in this space, and I realized they had a special edition Y2K copy of Playboy Magazine. And now you might understand why I'm dressed in a sort of theme for this video. I couldn't find the matching top, so I'm wearing TNA, which is the same thing. So I was flipping through this 1999 copy of Playboy Magazine, as you do. I understand people that are like, oh, I read Playboy for the articles. Because as I was flipping through the magazine, I found an article. I found an article that I was very interested in reading because lo and behold, in the middle of Playboy Magazine was an interview of my favorite author, Michael Crichton. What? Guys, I don't know, this is super random. Some other context to, I guess, why this interview even existed is because he had recently released his novel Disclosure, which is about sexual harassment. And it was also when the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky scandal was in full force. I really don't want to go down the rabbit hole of explaining what everything is that I'm talking about right now. So Google Monica Lewinsky for yourself. Google Disclosure because I don't feel like talking about them, but just be aware that sexual harassment and sex and politics was big in the news in 1999. And Michael Crichton at the time was also known as not the most politically correct author because no one really cared about that in 1999. He had already faced quite a bit of backlash about racism in his book Rising Sun. And then Disclosure, topically at the time, was facing a lot of feminist backlash. And as you know, Playboy Magazine, not the most feminist piece of journalism. So they were like, let's get our anti-feminism hero, Michael Crichton, in for an interview and we'll talk. And I read the interview and it is unfortunate. I don't want to speak ill of the dead, because if you didn't know, Michael Crichton did pass away. But I do want to share with you some choice pieces from the interview. And I'm going to do my best to not take anything out of context. I'm not going to be twisting any of the words used. I'm just going to read for you and put on the screen some of the stuff that I found in this interview that I was particularly disappointed by, because Michael Crichton is my hero. And then after we'll talk about, is he still my hero? Yet to be determined. So first, Playboy asked Michael Crichton, how do you decide which political or social problems to tackle? Michael Crichton said that certain issues just stay with him until others work themselves out. He said that certain stories have been fueled by his outrage, but then he'd lose that outrage and wouldn't really have the motivation to keep writing those stories. And then he says, sometimes somebody does a project that makes the issues go away. Or at least I think, well, that's been done, at least for now. I've been interested in doing something about political correctness, for instance. It gives me the creeps. But my sense is it started to give a lot of people the creeps. I don't think I'll have to write about it. It will defeat itself. Because political correctness will defeat itself because of its basic anti-American quality. You heard it here first, folks. Being politically correct is anti-American. Playboy followed up by asking, in disclosure, you took on sexual harassment. I don't know why, but they've hyphenated the word sexual, so it's sex. Whoa. Some people feel it's a central issue in the Lewinsky-Clinton scandal. Do you agree? Michael Crichton said, Lewinsky certainly shows us one thing that I tried to address in disclosure, the power of the victim. Feminists still don't acknowledge that the person who is sexually harassed has an enormous amount of power. Monica Lewinsky has shown she has quite a bit of power, hasn't she? Whether she ultimately brings down a president or not, this woman has proved that the so-called victim can be very powerful. Sorry for my word stuttering. This is crazy. Playboy simply said, feminists would disagree. To that, Michael Crichton replied, the Clinton scandal has put the final nail in the coffin of feminism, which has been in drastic decline for several years. Remember, this is 1999. People aren't stupid. They see the inconsistency and hypocrisy. Brock Adams, out. Robert Packwood, out. Teddy Kennedy, in. Bill Clinton, in. It's what I have always thought. If you like me, I can do whatever I want. If you don't, you're going to trash me for trivialities. That's the way guys always thought it was, and feminists said, no, it's not. There's a set of rules that apply to everyone. Guess what? It's not true. We'll take a little pause there so we can analyze what Michael Crichton has just said to us. I can see where he's coming from. Bear with me. I can see where he's coming from in the way of media, and I mean, he didn't even have social media back then, but social media kind of impacts us now. But in the media, if someone that the majority does not like does something scandalous, they are cast out. They've done a scandal. Leave. If someone in 1999 people do like does something scandalous, it's kind of forgiven or brushed under the rug. I think that is different now. It's interesting, actually. Did people in 1999 not thrive so much on scandals? They must have. But I think now, if someone we love does something scandalous, we kind of really hit them hard. And cancel culture is a thing, obviously. But even though the term cancel culture hadn't been coined in 1999, that still sounds a little bit like cancel culture. Next, Playboy said, it sounds as if you'd be delighted by the fall of feminism. Michael Crichton replied, in the same way there are fashion victims in terms of clothing, there are fashion victims in terms of ideas, and there are still victims of feminism. A lot of children are victims of an era when women declared their independence from men, saying they no longer needed them. A woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle. Women could do it by themselves. Well, the idea dovetailed rather nicely for a lot of young men who didn't want to be needed in the first place. Why am I giving him a transatlantic accent? Because this feels old-timey as hell. They didn't want to be committed to a family just because they got a girl pregnant, for instance. So it was convenient when women were saying men weren't needed. The idea that men didn't want responsibility wasn't new, but suddenly women were saying, yeah, we don't need you. And men were responding, great, goodbye. And they were on to the next conquest. But the kids who were left behind were victims of that fashion. There are many children raised without fathers, and they have suffered. Oh my God. What in the world? I don't think I have to unpack that back and forth too much for you. I think you understand what's going on there. Is he is saying women decided they don't need men, so they kicked them out of the house to go away, and then forced their children to grow up without a father because the men were banished and they were happy to be banished. So Playboy asked, should women return home and take care of the kids? Crichton said, I'm not saying we should go back to the 50s, as if we could. I've decided he said it that way. I don't actually know if he did. All I'm saying is that it's frivolous to pretend kids don't need to be raised. They do. I didn't realize that single parents couldn't raise a child. Playboy said feminists attacked disclosure, saying you trivialize sexual harassment by making the aggressor a woman and the victim a man, which is unlikely to be the case in real life. I don't remember what his exact response to this is, but this is where Playboy might not be super correct. I didn't know that it's a writer's obligation to do a typical story. The word is novel, in quotes. My reason for inverting this story was that inversion always allows you to see the issue freshly. What inspired the book was the polarization occurring in this country. I'm always interested in what's not being talked about. And at the time, everyone seemed to agree that the aggressor had all the power. I know things aren't so simple and aren't so clear. It's sex. And what's ever clear about sex? I really wish his response had been more along the lines of women can absolutely be the aggressors and men can absolutely be victims of sexual assault and harassment. And I wish I could say that Disclosure was a novel about men being allowed to speak up about their experiences, but it's not that. I'm going to share one more bit from this interview and then I'm going to take a little break again. Playboy asked, is the country less concerned with sexual harassment than it was when you wrote Disclosure? Because there is a couple years difference between when Disclosure was released and this interview took place. Michael Crichton said, there will be a new wave because of Clinton. Again, referencing the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. I expect that we'll see formal legislation changes and changes in social standards. But much of the hysteria has calmed down. I think it's because people see how absurd some of that is. I maintain that a lot of this play between people is human nature. You cannot keep people from telling dirty jokes, for example. It's just how we are. Fart jokes, ejaculation jokes. We're animals, and we think they're funny. People are realizing that it's ridiculous to try to change the stuff that is in our genes. Oh, buddy. Didn't you write a whole book about changing the genes of dinosaurs? Men and women are different. People are starting to understand that all those gender-free toys and raising kids in a non-violent, neutral way are a lot of baloney. And then he shares a little anecdote. When my daughter was 3, she went to a birthday party held in an indoor gym. The parents drew a line down the middle of the room and divided the kids up and had what was, in effect, a snowball fight with styrofoam balls. It provided the most persuasive evidence of gender differences I've ever seen. All the boys were throwing the balls, trying to kill each other, while the girls were running around and picking the balls up and putting them in baskets. Cleaning. These all were children of doctors and lawyers, all educated and aware and up to the minute. You can try to change things, but parents find out that if you take away a boy's plastic gun, he'll use a stick. If you take away the stick, he'll use his finger. Yep. The anecdote is certainly interesting if this is a true story, which why wouldn't it be? It's possibly evidence that boys are violent and girls like to clean, or it's that these kids are a product of social constraints and social pressures. And the little boys were allowed to do the more violent games, and the little girls were taught to clean. Now, I don't remember being 3 years old, and I'd like to think I would be one of the kids running around throwing snowballs, but honestly, maybe I would have been one of the kids that was standing around cleaning. Not to delve too deeply into my own childhood, but I certainly was not allowed toy guns. I did not play video games. Violence was very much kept out of my childhood, and I would have been 4 years old in 1999. So yeah, maybe I was part of this gender-neutral, non-violent toys movement, which is good. But because I was a girl growing up, I never really felt the social pressures of wanting to play with guns or playing video games with my friends, because mostly my friends were girls, and none of us were doing that because socially, we were not exposed to video games and things like that. He's not even talking about video games because this is the 90s. But oh my gosh, if this interview happened when there were video games, how would that change his story? So the interview does go on for quite a bit longer, mostly talking about whether or not Michael Crichton enjoys controversy, whether he knew he was inviting controversy when writing Disclosure and Rising Sun specifically. And basically his answers are, yes, I knew it was risky. I do enjoy controversy. It's what I'm here for. All of it leaves me feeling super icky, uncomfy, unhappy, disappointed. Jurassic Park is my favorite book of all time because of what it means to me. And as with my enjoying Harry Potter video that I made, I think it's important to separate art from the artist, and I think that you can absolutely do that. And Jurassic Park is still my favorite book, even after reading that interview and realizing that my literary hero had some not super cool views on feminism. There was, of course, also a lot of time between that interview happening and when he did pass away. So I kind of wonder what his views were later in life. I don't have any specific follow-up interview to this one. And I kind of think this interview obviously was made for the target audience of Playboy readers. So did that skew his answers as well? I don't know. I don't know, guys. And even though this interview is sucky, and if you didn't already know that Michael Crichton was like anti-feminist and definitely perpetuated Japanese stereotypes, I still really like the books. And people adore, obviously, the movies and the shows like Westworld. Overall, my feelings are confusing, upset. I also can't show any images from the actual magazine, even though I did take them because there's pictures of naked ladies throughout the article. The point of this video was just to share this bizarre interview with you because I felt like I'm the only person who's come across it in the wild. So I just wanted to put it out there so that I'm not the only one. I hope that your takeaway is not super negative from this video. And if it is, I'm sorry. Not that I did anything wrong, but I'm sorry that that's how you're feeling. Hopefully though, we can maybe not put all the hate on Michael Crichton and his legacy, and maybe focus on current issues that are more important, perhaps? That's how I feel. Anyways, before I go, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell icon so you know when I upload new videos. I upload 2 days a week. I love you guys. Goodbye.